I should add just a note about tacking and welding. When you weld, you put a lot of heat into the steel and it will distort. Basically, it'll pull. Wherever you weld, it'll tend to pull towards that weld, in simple terms. Whereas tacking, there's a little tack. It doesn't do a whole lot in terms of distortion and pulling. And obviously, the more heat you put into anything, or the more welding you do, the more it can twist and turn and do all sorts of things. So there's going to be a need to weld to a pattern to try and minimize the distortion. And the way I'm going to do it is weld from the inside of that corner to the outside, flip it over on those rotation points, and do the same on the other side, on the underside if you like, or what is actually the top side. Trailer's upside down. Then I'll go across to that far corner, get my hand out of it, go across to that far corner, do the same thing on that corner. Then I'll probably come up to this corner and then to that corner. So you're sort of working around the trailer in a sort of star pattern. And once you've done your welding, the thing will start to cool more or less straight away, and that's when it'll sort of pull. So and the sort of theory being that you've got to move from the outside of the trailer to the middle to essentially control those pulling forces. Of course, as you're welding, you start welding off here and the steel is cold, and as you move along it'll get hotter just naturally because the heat, and it'll sort of start off narrow and then spread out a little bit, the heat, as it goes out, and you can see that sort of heat mark there on the corner. So the thing about that is, obviously this end is welded and it's cold. You start here with the cold end, if you like, and weld out here. By the time it gets out here, it'll be at its hottest, but it also can't contract or move that much because this corner is welded out. So that all comes into it. Now obviously I've had to, because I want to be able to rotate the chassis so I can weld, it's good to weld these corners in pairs, i.e. do the top and then do the bottom, and then move on to the next corner. Because of that, I want to be able to move this whole trailer around and rotate it, which is why I've got it going to go onto a rotisserie type arrangement. But obviously I still need to be able to hold it up in the air without it falling apart and it damaging me. So it has got some reasonably decent welds already. There's either side of the drawbar there. The actual drawbar area is not fully welded out, but it's getting there. I'm not sure if you can see that, like that corner's not done, but this is welded to that and all that, so what you can see, that should be more than adequate to actually hold it up in the air. Most of the trailer's tacked, but there's just some key points where I've had to fully weld out. Now with MIG welding, if you try to weld, say I wanted to weld this corner, and you go, well, this should be fairly easy to weld. Well, it is and it isn't. Because if you try and weld up, the heating effect of the welding compounds, and you'll tend to blow right through unless you've got really thick steel. This is 5 and this is 4. So like I probably won't blow through, but I could. But welding down looks pretty, looks more like this, but it can get less penetration. And basically the whole effect of gravity just makes it really awkward to weld vertically. So being able to rotate the whole trailer so that this is actually up here makes it much easier to do, well, better welds and stronger welds. So I've just done tried to do a sort of what's easy and what's sort of a minimum and what's not going to impact the trailer too much in terms of twisting before I go crazy welding the whole thing out. The only real concern I have with the trailer, it's probably going to weigh 300 kilos or so, the whole chassis, with the suspension and everything else. The chassis itself is probably going to weigh about 160, 170, something like that, kilos, which could squash you. And so this front pivot point, which is temporary, just bolted on, needs to be very strong to be able to hold that weight. And the same with the one down the back. And the one down the back isn't welded out as much as up the front, that sort of square looking plate. The rear cross member isn't welded out as much. It's got the outside corner welded, but that was welded down, and so it wouldn't be as strong as if you did that same joint horizontally instead of vertically. And then you've got those corner pieces, and they're welded just, I suppose, 20 mil top and bottom in each sort of join. So it's hopefully going to be strong enough, and hopefully my little pivot point thing it will be strong enough. But well, it's a great way of testing out your welding skills. I'd rather not have the thing land on me. So the sooner I can get that back cross member welded up, the sooner I'll be happy. And then of course, well, you can see like under that suspension there where I've, all those little tacks holding things together. That'll eventually not get fully welded out, but it'll get welded out at least 50%. So yeah, the idea of that plate is you should never weld across, I probably mentioned it, but you should never weld across, where are we, the top and bottom surfaces of a member. It's quite normal for, or not normal, but it's not unusual for trailers to bend where the drawbar exits the chassis, if you like. And so the recommendation to not weaken the steel in that area is you don't weld. Where are we? Zoom out. You don't weld across under here, because that weakens the steel, and for the same reason you wouldn't weld across the top, because that will weaken the steel as well. So basically everywhere you weld, it's not so much the weld that is weak, it's the heat affected steel either side of the weld that is compromised, shall we say. So everything is going to be overbuilt on this trailer by a pretty decent factor, I would think. So, and that's just to cover off not having anything untoward happen. So yeah, you can see if I zoom in, the very back of the drawbar there where it sort of comes around, that's got a reasonably decent weld on there, but I will be putting a plate over it to join the two members. So that's just a little bit of how I'm going to go about welding it all. Hopefully by the end of it all, it won't be put out of alignment or warped like a potato chip too much. I am shooting for as greater accuracy as I can get. Corner to corner on the rectangle of the chassis is square, and there's a line that I've got that runs the whole length of the chassis on top of those noggings or whatever. It comes all the way up to the front, and that's all aligned as well. So yeah, measure, and eventually weld.